into a busy edition of the Monday Smash here on Warchant TV. What is going on here? Is this football season? It feels like it in late June. He's Ira Schofel, managing editor of Warchant.com. My name is Tom Lang, and tonight's program, as always, is presented by State Farm agent Russ Forhis. More on Russ in just a little bit. But hello, everybody in the chat. I feel like we might have a few more of you file into the building tonight because Ira, as the editor of the site, you've been doing a lot of editing of breaking news stories over the last couple of days. It's been heady times for Florida State recruiting. This is the best it's been in a little while. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's definitely a good run for them. As a lot of people are quick to point out that Florida State has had some good runs in the summer at times the last year or two, and maybe didn't finish as strong as you'd hope. But I look at last year, that class collapsed because they went 2-10. That wasn't a reflection of Mike Norvell as a recruiter. So people are going to bring that up. That's fine. And it's fine to say, well, we want to wait until these kids actually sign on the dotted line. That's all fair. That's all fine. And we all know that if this season doesn't go well, that this class will probably crumble just like the last class until they make some changes or do something like that. But from a standpoint of you're coming off a 2-10 season and you want to be as positioned as well as you could possibly be, here you are. Towards the end of the summer, you're 12 or 13 in the recruiting rankings. You've got 10 4-star prospects. You've got a bunch of other 3-star prospects. You're one of the highest rated recruiting classes in the country. It's where you want to be. Again, now they have to play well on the field. They've got to seal the deal. But you can't do any of that if you're not doing the work during the summer. So I think they deserve credit for what they're doing this summer.
Yeah, I totally agree. Last year, I think we agree on this. I heard you speak today on the Jeff Cameron show about it, but last year's class was ticketed to be top 10. If, right, the whole thing with the football team on the field didn't happen.
Maybe possibly top 5. I mean, that was the thought.
It was most certainly going to be in the single digits without question. And then if you have another good season to follow it up, whether you make the playoff or you don't, although if you did have a good season in a 12-team playoff, you get my point. You've got a chance to close and close strong. So it's not like the previous staff wasn't capable, but the problem, I think, Ira, the larger problem was a lot of those kids come in here and you're wondering, are they ever going to take a spot on the 2 deep? And in some positions, that just hasn't happened. At any rate, it is indisputable that they were going to have a very good recruiting class, but for the whole 2-10 thing. Now you bring in this new staff, it starts slow, you're kind of poking it with a stick. And I think they've done, at least for me, they've done more than I expected that they were going to be able to do to this point in the calendar without putting a product on the field. I did not think they would get this many yeses and have a run like they've had in the last 24 hours in which you have a 4-star quarterback, wide receiver, and tight end all commit in short order. They might not be done in that regard as well. I didn't think that they could get into the top dozen or Baker's dozen or so without, showing it on the field, Ira, but here they are and they've done it.
Yeah, and they do get credit for that. Now, we've been critical at times of certain things in recruiting. I've been critical of a couple things. One big one specifically a month or two ago. So it hasn't been all perfect, and I'm sure some of the evaluations they're making will be up for determination later on. But in terms of filling needs, they're doing a good job of that. And then I really, they played the Jaden O'Neal situation probably as well as they could play it. There were other quarterbacks they could have gone after that might have been more sure things. But I think they had a hunch the way things were going at Oklahoma that at some point they were going to have a good chance at getting the quarterback that they had high on their board after already getting the commitment from Jaden O'Neal. And I think Florida State just kept working that and waiting for that to fall into place, and it ended up happening. So they played that one really well, and I think that now will lead to some other benefits. As you said, they got the Xavier Tiller, a 4-star tight end, committed today. Devin Carter, a 4-star wide receiver, committed today. They got an offensive lineman over the weekend. There's a few more guys it sounds like they're in really good position for that maybe we'll hear about in the next day or two or the next week. So, man, again, I get it. We can all say it as a chorus. It doesn't matter till they sign, but you'd rather be here than where Auburn is today, steady losing recruits to a Florida State team that went 2-10 a year ago.
Without a doubt, Auburn's dropping into the 50s in the 2026 class rankings. I mean, it is precipitous, the drop off for Auburn. Yeah, I agree. You would rather have kids say no to you because the product on the field stinks rather than them saying yes at any point, never saying yes at any point at all. And that's where Florida State is now. A host of content available on warchant.com and on Warchant TV regarding these commitments. Jaden O'Neal, Devin Carter, Xavier Tiller. If you want to see expanded comments, analysis, head over to warchant.com, the premium recruiting board. Sign up if you haven't. It's just $1. If you're a student, it's absolutely free, and that's really, really cool too. We'll give you information on that in a little bit. And also those video breakdowns are all available. I think everybody tagged in at some point for these videos, Ira. We've got Matt on a couple. Michael Aslan was on today's for Devin Carter. I was on the one for Xavier Tiller. Everybody's getting involved in the recruiting thing. We'll get to Tommy Castellanos in a little bit, but just to put a footnote on it, this is the end now of those June official visit windows. You're now into the dead period. So it's all about the analysis that comes out of all of those official visits. Michael Langston will be by to join us on the Smash in about 35 minutes time to discuss those things and answer your questions. I guess so here we are, Ira. We got about 6 weeks until we're really into the throes of camp for Florida State football. I think I would call it mission accomplished in terms of recruiting. Am I going too far there before we move on to team stuff?
No, I think especially if they get a couple more of these guys that sounds like they may get, because, and you made a really good point. The way the process works now, the recruiting calendar for people that maybe are watching this or consume some of our content but are not diehard into recruiting, the calendar is totally different from the way it used to be. And the way it works now is you really have to make hay in June, because that's when you can really get your official visits. And so the recruits you have now that you have committed, which Florida State does, are probably going to stay largely intact for the rest of this summer. There will be some openings later on where kids can start making visits again. But for right now, for a good chunk of time, Florida State, these commitments they have, these kids will not be visiting other schools. Now, those schools can call, they can talk, they can text, but not necessarily go on campus and take visits. So you're in really good position. And then what has to happen is you have to do it on the field. And that's been the story all year. I mean, we've been talking about this since the end of last season. No matter what you do in terms of recruiting during the spring and summer, you're going to have to back it up on the field. If they go out there and play poorly again, well, yeah, man, they're not going to keep this class together. But if they can, then maybe they will. And, again, going back to what I said at the beginning, I just think that the perception of Mike Norvell as a closer, a little bit unfair, because I don't know that anybody could have closed after a 2-10 season. I mean, look back at who they had committed. They had maybe the best wide receiver class in the country. They had studs lined up on that team last year in that recruiting class, but they all just fell off when you started. You looked like you've never played football before. Who would stick through that with you? They had a few kids do, but the vast majority didn't. And then they went out and made a big splash, probably thanks in large part to NIL, but they did it, and they put that class together. But again, I don't think it was a closing issue as much as it was you went 2-10.
No, they salvaged the hell out of that, and I saw Al in the chat put that earlier. Didn't they finish strong? Hell yeah, they did. That was, I think, largely NIL aided for Florida State to get some yeses and flips from SEC programs at the 4-star and 5-star level. Chroma, LaJesse Harold, Tylon Lee, among many others that Florida State was able to flip in the late going in the 2025 cycle. Yeah, even despite all of that, they climbed back right around the top 20, and they were falling where Auburn is right now in the 50s. So if it wasn't for that, it would have been a total disaster of a class, but they salvaged something. They're looking for more momentum. We'll document it as we go along. Z-Chan in the chat, the official DMD of Warchant TV. Thank you so much, good sir, for the contribution. He says 9-3. You heard it here first. Understood. I know, Ira, that if Tommy Castellanos is to be believed, getting to 9 wins would include an opening win against Alabama. We're going to talk about those comments. We've already seen, as we were coming in here, a lot of questions already about what do you think about Tommy C's comments. Where would you like to begin with quarterback Tommy Castellanos' quotes in the Pete Nakos article that's available at On3 and the bravado shown by Florida State signal caller?
Also, yeah, I just want to say thanks to Z-Chan as well. I guess I want to start with people, and again, younger people would have no idea, but people my age, probably between our ages, you probably wouldn't, but people my age would remember there was a time when football players, even college football players, would say things like that all the time. If you go back, and I would do this sometimes when I worked at the Democrat, I would read in the archives, old articles before the Miami game or before the Florida game. And Florida State's players in the late 80s and 90s would say all kinds of things. Miami's players would say all kinds of things. Florida's, and it's like everything's gotten so sanitized now where, nobody wants anybody to say anything that's going to be bulletin board material. And I get it. I understand it. It can be thrown back in your face. But man, I don't think it's as big a deal as people are going to make it. It's not like Alabama's going to start working out harder now. It's not like their defensive linemen are going to run more wind sprints today. Oh, let's get an extra couple wind sprints in today to throw it back at Tommy Castellanos. I mean, it was going to be a big game no matter what. Alabama's going to try no matter what. The only thing it does is it sets you up to get egg on your face if you don't play well. And now that's up to Tommy. But listen, if Tommy doesn't play well in that game, that was going to happen anyway. I guess that's my big takeaway. And I mentioned on Jeff's show today, I always go back to the Geno Hayes, Tim Tebow thing. And it's like people were mad at Geno Hayes for talking big about, he made a comment like the bigger they are, the harder they fall before they played Florida. And everybody was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then certainly Tim Tebow was Tim Tebow and ran over Geno Hayes and had a huge game. And people are like, oh, he should have never run his mouth. Well, I mean, that was going to happen no matter what. And people are going to laugh at him no matter what when he tried to tackle Tim Tebow, who, weighed 40 pounds more than he did. So I don't know. That's why, especially as a sports writer, I'm never going to tell kids to not say more. So I didn't have a problem with it, but I understand why people get nervous because they don't like to give any edge to any opponent.
That's fair, especially as somebody in sports. I said it during the opening segment today. I said, well, I mean, we've got something to talk about now in the slow times on a slow Monday in June. Let's phrase it this way. Jaylen Brown, not that Jaylen Brown, but hello, Jaylen. He says, what were your initial thoughts when you saw the Tommy C comment? So when you read it today, Ira pulls it up on his tablet or your phone or your laptop. Was it a laugh? Was it a, ooh, what was it? What was your first initial response?
What's funny is the first thing I saw was, I think, because Pete Nakos had pulled it out. And if you want to read it, people can go to warchant.com or On3, our network that we're part of. Pete Nakos has the story, and there's full quotes from a one-on-one interview with Tommy Castellanos. And the first quote I saw was the one that he pulled out. It was in the headline. I think it was in a tweet, something about, saving the coaches' jobs and all that. And I was like, what? Like, I didn't really understand that one. I mean, I appreciate it. I appreciate the sentiment. I don't think anybody's too concerned about these coaches and their houses, their house payments. I think they're going to be okay. Maybe Tommy doesn't realize they still get buyouts if they get fired. But so that was kind of my first thing. But then I got a couple texts from people, including Aslan, one of our colleagues, in our group text with Corey, and he gave us a little summary of the comments. And I was like, okay, well, I need to go check these out. And I read them, and honestly, a lot of them are things that you knew were going on, like the stuff about BC, the stuff about Bill O'Brien. Like, we kind of knew all that was there. He just had been very diplomatic up until this point. And for whatever reason, he decided this interview was the time to maybe talk a little bit more openly about it. But, some people didn't like that. Some people didn't like the fact that he, said Nick Saban's not there to save them. And, that's the one that I think is definitely going to be rubbed in his face for sure if he doesn't play well and if they lose. But in general, I didn't think it was crazy. Again, I see it from a different perspective than I'm sure a lot of fans do. What did you think when you first saw it?
So the Saban thing was funny. I laughed at that. Nick Saban, because I immediately think of when you guys talk about it, Jeff will talk about Ray Lewis is not ready for that tunnel,
the Patino game from Le Batard show. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Nick Saban's not marching out of that tunnel. Yeah. I thought that was funny. I didn't love the quote. I know you caught a little bit of this thing when you were talking with Jeff, but I didn't love the quote about I won, I was electric in the ACC and the team was on my damn back or whatever he said, to the effect of it was just me essentially and a bunch of bums. And I was the one that was the reason that Boston College succeeded. I'm like, in that moment, I realized that it definitely took two to tango with the split with Bill O'Brien, who I don't like and has a history of a lot of issues with players, cringe issues, especially the DeAndre Hopkins situation with the Houston Texans. So like when that breakup happened, I knew O'Brien is insufferable. But now I get a little bit of a window into why Tommy could have probably been an excellent dance partner for Bill O'Brien. And my thought initially after that was, to answer Jalen's question, well, he better play well from the jump because, if this thing starts mediocre or below average, I don't know, man. Now I have questions about how will he handle adversity if things get a little bit ugly in the moment. I think that's now a legitimate concern, greater than I thought it was even after the story about him leaving Boston College. What would you say to that?
That's a fair point. Where I would push back on that is what attracted Tommy Castellanos to Florida State. He talks about it in the article. They were desperate and they wanted me. Like, they could have written a check and gone and got a different quarterback, but they wanted me. And I think for Tommy Castellanos, this is the first time in his career where a team has kind of gone to him and said, look, man, we do want you. You're our guy. We want to build an offense around you. We want you to help us go get receivers. So you come back into town and you help us get Deuce Robinson. You help us get Squirrel White. And we're gonna have you be part of the process. This is gonna be your offense. He's never had that before. So I think he that's what attracted him to Florida State as much as anything else. He could have gone somewhere else. He certainly could have gone to a school that didn't go 2-10 a year ago. But I think that all appeals to him. So he wants to be that guy. And I think that when you look at the way he played last season, it's hard to judge him because, and really, I think 2 years ago is probably closer to what Florida State's going to do. I think BC did try to kind of scheme things up to take advantage of his talents. But Bill O'Brien certainly didn't. And to the contrary, it was almost like he went overboard the other way. So my guess is over the last 4 or 5 months, maybe Castellanos has seen some of the stuff on social media. I mean, he gets buried from the FSU fan base sometimes on Twitter. There's memes about his height. There's just stuff that's negative about him. So I wonder if that all kind of plays into it as well, where he's like, look, man, we're going to do some things. The other part of it, though, I would say is this. What's weird to me about it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Some people who are kind of mad at him for having a personality, and that's what he is, man. He is a big personality. He was that way in high school. He was that way at BC, even though they didn't have a big spotlight on them. That's who he is. That's how he plays. He didn't back down from Florida State. He's got a big personality. But last year, a lot of people criticized DJ Uiagalelei for being too quiet, for not being a leader, for not being more of an alpha. And it's like, okay, well, where does he have to be? Like, what's the perfect place? What's the perfect lane for a quarterback? And so, yeah, he hasn't proven anything in Florida State yet, but he's damn sure proved he can make plays. And Florida State's building around that, and I think that's giving him some confidence.
Yeah, I don't mind that the quarterback of my football team believes that Alabama can't stop him or anybody can't stop him. You need to have that belief in order to be in this position and in order to surprise people. Because if you don't believe in yourself, nobody will. There's a person that when Dominic Robinson and I did a couple breakdowns and he provided the film and he showed some of these things between plays that Tommy Castellanos did, to rile up the team, fire up the team. Baker Mayfield was the name that came up. And I'll agree with that. As a Buck fan, when I watched Baker Mayfield in college, I hated his guts. I'm like, this guy trying to plant the flag in Columbus. Get the hell out of it. What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? And then he goes to Cleveland. He does the commercials and all that stuff. Well, magically, Ira, I don't know if you'll believe me or not, but he totally changed as a person when he got to Tampa Bay. He's completely different than he has ever been, except not at all. It's just that he's wearing my laundry. And now he's playing really well, like better than I thought he would play. Yeah. And so when he walks out and throws his chest out and he does the Tommy Cutlets when he's at the Meadowlands, I love it. I love the hell out of that stuff. Yeah. If it works early for Tommy C, this is a match made in heaven with the fan base because of what you're talking about, like the defiance of these other people went 2-10. I didn't go 2-10. I'm coming in here to change things. If it works early, this is going to be a love affair. But I think what happens today is if it flops early, it could spiral out of control really, really fast, and there might be some more quotes.
I hear what you're saying. I think the difference, though, between those two guys, and again, we're going to talk and write a ton about the difference between Tommy Castellanos and DJ Uiagalelei, two guys who probably don't barely even know each other very well at all, other than shake hands maybe after a game, a couple of years ago or maybe last year. That I felt like confidence was what was desperately needed for DJ. Like, I felt like DJ needed confidence. He needed this fan base to kind of support him after everything he had gone through at Clemson. and being booed by his own fans and kind of run out of town. And then he comes to Florida State, and this is his chance to kind of resurrect his career. And then he doesn't play all that great at Ireland. And he comes home, and they're starting to chant, "We want Brock," 3 series in the first home game. I thought that was very detrimental to him. The difference between DJ and Tommy is, I'm not worried about Tommy's confidence. There's nothing that all is going to shake Tommy Castellano's confidence. He's the dude that if somebody beat him on the playground playing basketball 10 straight games, he's going to be checking it in. "Oh, I got you now." So I'm not worried about that snowballing, because he'll make plays. They'll come. Now, whether or not they win or not, that Alabama game, we'll have to see. But the other thing is, again, I think if you're the coaching staff, I'm curious what they think when they see it. Because in general, coaches don't love it when players are braggadocious or whatever. But at the same time, you want a guy that guys are going to rally around. The other example that came to my mind today, besides Geno Hayes, was the Northern Illinois quarterback. Jordan Lynch, was that his name?
Jordan Lynch, yep.
When he made his comment, they've never dealt with our tempo. By the end of the game, they're going to be on their knees or whatever. And the fan base used that to rally around. And some of the FSU players made comments about it, and that's true. I doubt Northern Illinois' coaches were mad at him for doing that, though. I'm sure they liked the idea that he had that swagger and he was trying to embody his players. And Florida State was going to beat them anyway. It wasn't like that was the key to the game. So, I think at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to have an impact on much. But if it does give his players, some teammates, some confidence, then that may be worth a lot.
Agreed. Yeah, I'll get to a comment from Dave here in a second. But the funny part to me, just one little fact check thing is he said, "Well, if you looked at us at Boston College, we always kicked ass." Essentially, I'm paraphrasing, out the gates, our first game of the season. Last season, we all know what their first game was, and they did, and they dominated Florida State. He didn't have to be great. He didn't even have to run, which we all were scared of him running. They lost to Northern Illinois the year before in overtime in their opener. Hey,
I think he might be saying the first game when I played.
Yes.
I think, didn't he get in after that? That's when the starter got benched.
He played Northern Illinois. No, I pulled up his game log. He was 13 for 28. He did run for 60 yards. I'm like, right. All right, man. All right. I hope
he came off the bench and they won the job. But yeah. That's fair.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Dave says, and this, I want to ask your thoughts on this. New OC, DC quarterback, an entirely new starting lineup, nearly. I like that there's no tape or plan for what is coming. I don't remember, Ira, a team, at least since I've been here in town for 20 years, where it feels like a total blind guess as to what you're going to see in game one. It might be that in some years there's a new quarterback making his first start, or certainly a new coach, and so you're going to see a scheme. But you had a general idea of the players you had on the roster in a given year. I mean, you airdropped 9 to 11 starters on the offense with a new coordinator. And that's what Florida State is going to be against Alabama. On defense, probably 5 or 6 new starters, maybe 4 at the smallest number, but a new coordinator and a new scheme. Yeah. Do you remember a situation like this where the first game is going to be just totally new without the head coach changing, especially?
Yeah, I mean, not off the top of my head. I mean, I'm sure if we did some research, we could try to find something. But I think the difference is, even if you find examples of that in the past, you rarely find it where you're bringing in so many experienced players. You might have had a year where you had 10 seniors on offense. You had a great season. And then next year, it's a bunch of dudes have to step up, and they were role players, and now they've got to step up. But not bringing in entirely new players who weren't even part of this program, most of them, and then again adding into it the new scheme. That part of it's definitely strange. It's got to be impossible to handicap. And we can all sit here and talk about the win-loss totals that are out there and what the FPI says and what this handicapper or this expert says, but nobody has any idea. In fact, I was talking to somebody earlier today about the offensive line. He was like, how do you feel about the offensive line depth? And how do you feel? And I was like, man, I don't think they have any idea, because that offensive line, most of those guys weren't even available in the spring. And so this is going to be something that they see over the course of the summer. The one positive thing, and this is where I'm usually the silver lining guy, I get it. But I think it's a real positive for Florida State in this given circumstances, the fact that you do have all this time in the summers now, and that you didn't used to have all this time in the summers. Coaches couldn't work with the players. Players had to do it on their own. Maybe the strength coaches could do certain things with them. But now your football staff is out there. They do skills and drills. They are doing things, and not just putting in schemes and walkthroughs, but they're actually evaluating players all through this entire summer. So I think that's going to help them a lot, at least know what they have. But yeah, as far as a fan base or the opponents, that's got to be tough.
And just in general, I'd do this. We talked about this on JCS a little bit today. As we're getting closer, and tomorrow marks you're into the 50s for the first game of the season, which will be the kickoff classic in Ireland, and Florida State will be in the mid 60s before the kickoff against Alabama. When you daydream or your mind wanders and you're thinking about whatever the 2025 group is going to be, do you find yourself more curious and interested to see what the offense is led by Tommy, or seeing what Tony White's defense is?
Probably just because I'm, probably like most people, I think my first thought is the offense. When I think about this team, I'm very excited and curious about the offense. The defense, I feel like I have a less of an idea of what it could look like. I think with the offense, I feel like I have an idea of what it's going to look like, partly because I know Tommy's skill set, partly because I know what Gus does on offense, partly because I feel like it makes sense what they've done through the bringing this team together. Defense to me is a little tougher just because Tony White, I think, is kind of takes like an amoeba approach. I think defensively, I think it could look different from year to year. I think it's not necessarily the personnel he would have wanted across the board if he was going shopping for ingredients, so he's working through this. And we talked to him a little bit in the spring about, there's a player, I mentioned a guy in the defensive line breakdown, Grant Fielder, who's a player that only the diehard FSU fans even know is on the roster. Grant Fielder is a defensive lineman, son of Cecil Fielder, brother of Prince Fielder, didn't choose baseball, has been a walk-on at Florida State defensive end for the last 2 or 3 years, a little bit undersized. He's not 6'5". That's why he's a walk-on. He's probably 6'2". That's what they list him at. But really athletic. And just from talking to people around the program, they love Tony White, took a real liking to him and thinks there's ways to use him. Well, that's fascinating. Like, I'm curious to see what he does with these pieces he has, but I can't even picture it. Like on the offense, I feel like I can picture it. So that's probably where my mind goes first. How about you?
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, the defense is, I was talking about the mystery of the first game. The defense is a total mystery. Like, what's their front seven? How many down linemen? How many linebackers? Down to down. And the Alabama game might be a special case, Ira, that he wants to see some things specific to the opponent. But then you've got East Texas A&M, a bye week in Kent, and it could look different for the Virginia game. Like, we might not know what Tony White's defense is until Halloween. And at that point, you're almost all the way through the season. Like, especially with the defensive line, like, we know where James Williams is going to line up, generally speaking. We know where Darrell Jackson is going to be. Beyond that, personally, Ira, I got no idea. Like Daniel Lyons, I know is going to be in the rotation. So is KJ Sampson. They like Diamante Diggs. They like McCray. But I have no idea how good those players are. Jason Jenkins would have been a humongous part of the plan. I have no idea how good those players are. I don't know how they're going to be, who they're going to line up over. It's a total mystery.
And on Jason Jenkins, we don't know when he's going to be fully available. Is he going to be available early in the year? Is it going to be later in the year? They've made it seem like he will be available at some point, but we don't know exactly when. So it's another variable. But I will say this, talking about the defensive line, and for people that aren't on warchant.com, we've done position previews for every position. You can go read. It's got a breakdown of every player at every position. And then some, what we like, what our concerns are, whether the group should be better or worse. And I didn't realize the numbers they really have. I mean, they do. I mean, it's like 16 or 17 guys on the defensive line, which for a 3-man front seems excessive. But I do think that speaks to, he and Mike Norvell have said repeatedly, they will be in some 4-man fronts. It's not going to be exclusively a 3-man front. And I think that having that flexibility, now several of those defensive linemen are freshmen. There's 3 or 4 or 5 freshmen who are probably not going to play, maybe freshmen and one junior college transfer. But it's still over 10 of other guys that are veterans that could be rotated in there. So I think I'm curious to see what that defensive line looks like. And to your point, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't shock me if they, especially against Alabama with that offensive line, maybe you do more 4-man front, or certainly you can flex out these defensive ends as that jack linebacker. It's going to be fun to watch. And I also think just the impression I get from Tony White is it may change from series to series. Like it may change certainly from half to half. So that side of the ball is going to be, especially from what it's been the last few years. I mean, Adam Fuller was pretty much, you saw what you were going to get. Maybe he dialed up a blitz here or there, but it was pretty vanilla. This is going to be totally different.
Yeah, and in the past 15 years for Florida State football, Jeremy Pruitt's defense had a lot of different wrinkles to it. Charles Kelly's was a similar defense to Jeremy Pruitt, but it was more simple. Don't take my word for it. Niall Lawrence Stample, we did a video on that last year where he explained it himself about how there was multiplicity, but it wasn't the same thing as Pruitt. When he was doing calculus, Kelly simplified it for everybody down to an easier level of math. This is going to be back to graduate level course about what to expect, the angles they create, the disguises. I saw in the chat somebody who alertly was watching. Let's see, Dave again. All the interviews we've heard from players, they spoke of multiple disguises. That makes it more mysterious. It absolutely does, and you heard that a lot from the linebackers during spring camp. I know, Ira, you were there personally for those interviews, but Juice Cryer, Omar Graham, I mean, they all talked about it, how different things are series to series or play to play.
What I love about that the part I love about that more than the X's and O's, and I know you're the X's and O's guy, so that's where you're probably focused. What I love about it is you could see how the players got excited about it. And again, going back to the difference from Pruitt to Kelly, we talked to some of the players on defense early in Charles Kelly's tenure, right after Pruitt left, and you could tell they believed in Jeremy Pruitt a lot more than they believed in Charles Kelly. They did not love some of the play calls. They didn't love some of the changes he was making. What that boils down to is they didn't have the same conviction about him as their defensive coordinator, as their leader. And I think you saw that play out over those next couple of seasons. Adam Fuller to Tony White, I never heard guys really talk that excitedly about Adam Fuller's defense or what he was doing and the positions he was putting them in to make plays. They are really excited about Tony White and what he's doing with them. And sometimes when you do different things, it may not even be conceptually majorly different, but sometimes players want to know that you're doing things creatively. You're giving them opportunities to make big plays. And if they believe in that, man, they're going to play so much harder. And that's the number one thing I want to see out of this defense under Tony White is I want to see these guys play harder for him than they did for Adam Fuller. And I think by doing those things and getting them to buy into it, I think that's the ticket to that.
A big part of it. And Jeffrey Hill, thank you for the contribution with the old Bobby logo. Says, I'm very curious on both sides of the ball to see how they're going to perform, and I can't wait to see it. Yeah, agreed. And Jeffrey, thank you very much for the contribution. Ira, a thing I think that both new coordinators share is that what they're trying to do is confuse the opposition. And I don't know, like what you're talking about with Adam Fuller, there were some times where they disguised a blitz, but you knew what you were getting. Especially if you're a wide receiver. The guy's going to be in man across from me. I understand what that is. Tony White is trying to confuse you, whether it's a receiver, whether it's the offensive line and their blocking assignments, or the quarterback pre-snap. He's trying to confuse you. And Gus, in the same way, is trying to put you in conflict where there's misdirections when you start to assume and you take a half step in one direction, he goes the other way. That's different. You kind of knew what was coming. Certainly a couple of years ago, it was going to be counter with the run. And then the 2023 offense, a lot of deep throws. That was the offense. Gus is going to mix it up. Even though it's the same formation and there's tempo, he's going to mix it up. And Tony White, unlike Adam Fuller, he's going to be all about disguises. Like that, to Jeffrey's point, I think that might be what excites him. That's what excites me. The objective seems to be a little bit different. Rather than line it up and we're better than you, it's line it up and you better have studied, because if you didn't, this test, you're going to fail. Yeah, and I think this is where you don't love opening with Alabama from the standpoint of these guys believe in them now. And I think that's great. And it's important. And it's really, and I think the approach those guys are taking in terms of trying to be, do more disguising is very appropriate and perfect for this team right now, because you are bringing in so many new guys, so many new faces. And you're probably not going to, certainly in that Alabama game and in 2 or 3 other games,
you're not going to have a decided physical advantage. So you've got to scheme it up and give your guys some opportunities to make plays. The key, though, is in that Alabama game, some of this better work. And then when it doesn't work, you better have some answers. And I think that's going to be the key in that game, because the last thing you want for the players, especially coming off of 2-10, even the ones who didn't play in 2-10, but are aware of 2-10, you don't want them to go into that game and at some point feel like these coaches don't have answers. Like they can't figure out how to make this work, because that is going to be a problem that they have to deal with through the entire season. So the ideal situation would be starting with somebody else, because you could get that confidence, especially, this is not a year with a new head coach, but it feels that way. And I think, and when you have a new head coach, I think it really benefits you to have a couple of easy games early in the year to get those guys, get that confidence. They're not going to have the luxury of that. They got to do it against Alabama. And if they do, man, I really think this season could go extremely well, going back to Zchan with his 9-3 or even better than that. But if you struggle in that game and the coaches don't feel like they have the answers, that's going to be a challenge that they have to work through.
I'm going to tell you about our fine sponsor, Russ Voorhis, larger-than-life personality, excellent service for 3 states. But before we do that, we got to promo something for the kids. They're making their way back to campus for, different summer sessions. Ira knows all about that. Summer B, summer C. I can't tell them anymore different. But the free student membership at warchant.com is here, everybody. If you are a student at Florida State University, this is a welcome gift to you. And we've got a QR code on the screen. If you're watching, just take a screenshot, whatever you need to do. I'm going to tell you how to get involved verbally, which is very, very simple. All you got to do is email support@warchant.com. That is support@warchant.com with your student email account. That's your fsu.edu account. And we're going to get you hooked up with a free membership to warchant.com. No credit card required. It's that simple. Welcome to Tallahassee. Welcome to being a student at Florida State University. If you want to know more about your sports, we're the best people to tell you about what's going on with Florida State sports at warchant.com. Ira, I wish they had this back when I was a student. I would have used it 100%. My buddies were members of Warchant back in the mid-2000s because they were really dying for the recruiting information. It could have been a gateway drug for me, and I would have gotten hooked on it way earlier than I did.
Let me ask you a question. Was that an optical illusion? Was the QR code like garnet? I couldn't, or is it just, it is?
It is. Yeah.
Oh, it's not enough. Sometimes, you look at, they'll tell, the colors aren't really what you think because your eye's playing tricks on you. I couldn't tell if that was because of the background, but nice. I like the garnet QR code. That's pretty sharp. I've never seen one of those. So yeah, man, students, take advantage of it. Start your free membership.
Don't worry, everybody. You're not smelling burning toast. The colors are fine. It is a garnet QR code. And somebody who is always in the spirit of celebrating the garnet and the gold is State Farm agent Russ Voorhis, who represents State Farm, and he covers you in 3 different states, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. If you've got a need and you want to support somebody who supports Florida State athletics from the top to the bottom, Ira, Russ Voorhis is that guy, and there's no question about it.
Yeah, if you're buying a new car or if you're maybe changing something with your home insurance, listen, it's important to stay on top of that stuff because sometimes those policies can change on you a little bit. You get the little addendum that tells you something that if you're not paying attention. Also, we all know that if you are with an insurance agent for some time, a lot of times those rates can escalate on you if you're not shopping around. So again, just give Russ and his staff a call. They've got all the information you need. Really good guy. And please tell them that you heard about him on the Smash and warchant.com. Maybe you'll get Russ on the phone. He'll talk a little football with you, talking about the Noles. Maybe, I was thinking with Tommy, I think maybe Tommy got boosted by Russ Voorhis's size and strength and stature. That maybe gave him a boost of confidence before he made his comments.
A little inspiration. Yeah, Russ maybe Tommy needs Russ to go with him to the clubs as the bouncer.
Russ does not lack confidence. We know that much.
And people would not mess with Russ on site. He is a serious looking man with a heart of gold, and he can help you with the power of State Farm at his back. Ira, things to promote coming up this week. I know it's been one hell of a Monday, very busy one. Anything you'd like to promote that's coming up this week, or that maybe we missed today, and with all the breaking news of the new commitments? Yeah,
we're still breaking down the top 5, top 40. We had a new installment that went up this morning, and then it got buried pretty quickly. It was Corey did a piece on I think we're 26 to 30 in the top 40 right now. And, but then it was just commitment, the Castellano story, the FSU trustees announcing that they're going to do the transfer of funds to get $22.5 million to use for the revenue sharing with the student athletes as part of the House settlement. More recruiting. I just put up, Matt has a really good story that if you aren't subscribers or if you start your subscription tonight, Matt, I just put up a really good story about Matt, about the offensive line commitment that FSU just got the commitment over the weekend. Really interesting story. A guy from London, England, who did a lot of research before he even came to the States he's been playing football for the last couple of years, did some research, kind of narrowed in on FSU, came to a game last season to watch Florida State in person, talked to Mike Norvell, and really at that point decided this is where he wanted to go, but he didn't have an offer. Came back last week. They moved him from defensive line to offensive line. He got an offer, and then he committed to Florida State. Really interesting story. Seems like a really sharp kid. That story just went up on the website, and we got a lot more too. Michael's got a lot of recruiting coming as well. And then tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, as you well know, Tom, a bunch of newcomers at Florida State are going to be available for interviews. They're going to make the players that came in during the summer months, the freshmen, and then the other remaining transfers who came in during the summer are going to be available to the media tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday in the afternoon. So we'll have videos up of all those guys as well as stories and a lot of content, especially for late June in Tallahassee.
And spread out some guys who are going to contribute right away at Florida State across those days. Tomorrow, Jeremiah Wilson is the headliner of the people that you would think are going to contribute. Of course he is in his first season at Florida State. But tomorrow, Jarvis Boatwright Jr., Antonio Cromartie Jr., Jalen King, Zay Thomas. Those are the others at 3 o'clock tomorrow. You can find those videos and the coverage on the channel in the afternoon. Wednesday, Gavin Blackwell, receiver transfer from North Carolina. Chasten Brown, late flip to Florida State. Usman Kroma, there it is. Sound the siren. Usman Kroma speaks to the press on Wednesday. Tariq Mallory and Sean Perrette as well, a receiver and an offensive lineman. Then on Thursday, Jalen Matthews, Josh Raymond, Bruno Roos. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Maybe it's Reese. Gavin Sawchuk, ding, 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 and Chavez Thompson as well. So loaded up with interviews coming on the channel as well as all the coverage that Ira spoke to you about. Anything else, Ira? Parting shot in the parlance of PTI before you go for the evening, or anything else?
I haven't watched all the chat, but I did watch Spartan. I saw Spartan Knoll just said we had a guy from England on the offensive line in 2013. Menelik Watson, who we all remember is famed from the former boxer, and he was a famous character on Seminole headlines. Much unbeknownst to him, we used to frequently discuss what combination of the three of us, Corey, Jeff, and Ira, if Menelik was blindfolded, could any of us or all three of us, could any of us take him out? Because Menelik Watson was as impressive physically as any human being you've ever seen. So I don't think we ever had much confidence that any of us could take out Menelik Watson, even if he was blindfolded. So
you would have needed Daryl Jackson. You would have needed Daryl Jackson to assist you in the process there, because you're right. What a menacing looking person Menelik Watson was.
But also just sweet as sugar. And because he was only here for 1 year, this is my last parting shot for Jimbo Fisher. He was only here for 1 year, and because Jimbo Fisher had a policy where you couldn't talk to first-year players, we never got to talk to Menelik Watson literally until the bowl game, when everybody became available at the national championship game. Everybody's available. We got to talk to him. Unbelievable human being. Funny, smart, engaging. Would have been great to talk to all the season, but we weren't allowed to talk to him. And so that was unfortunate. But I had a little bit of a career in the NFL, and I thought he would have done more in the NFL because he was a really good player at Florida State. But just a cool dude. And I hopefully somebody at FSU has been around long enough to tell this young man Francis about Menelik Watson.
There you go. Yeah, long line of it now. You could have 3 different offensive linemen in a 12 to 13 year span that play down for Florida State, because Big Meech has some history in England as well. All right, Ira, appreciate it as always. We got recruiting coming up next. Any questions you have for me for Michael, or are you gone?
I'm good. I mean, I text Michael plenty. Believe me. Every question I've got an answer from him and Matt throughout the day. But enjoy it. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching. Talk to you next time, Tom.
All right, we'll be back in 15 seconds with Michael Langston here on Warchant TV.
Contact Russ Voris for an auto quote today.
I was going to keep asking Ira questions until he said, "Stop asking me questions. I want to leave." And I think we got to that point. We appreciate Ira Chaffel, as always. Here is Michael Langston, senior recruiting analyst for Warchant.com, on what is a heady evening in Tallahassee as Florida State's on a run. They're cooking, Michael. This is a lot better than the alternative, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's a lot better. And I was worried I was going to get here in time. I was working on something. Hopefully, people will see that in the coming days, or maybe tonight. I don't know. I think mentioned about the stuff they're getting, the commits they're getting, but I think probably more is coming. I'll just put it that way. For those that missed it, this happened while you guys were doing the show. Three-star offensive lineman Jacoby Green decommitted from Mississippi State. Um, we're expecting FSU, so that was kind of part of what I was working on, so that happened during y'all's show. So that's something we're certainly tracking, and a lot of others we're tracking. That certainly it's going to be a busy summer for June and July for FSU, of as far as waiting to see on these other news. But yeah, crazy day.
Yeah, Jacoby Green from Niceville, 6'2.5", 325, according to his On3 listing. It looks like the next round of On3 updates will be kinder to him because right now he's a 3-star. He's a solid 3-star, but some of the other services have this particular offensive lineman like in the top 50 at his position. On3 has not caught on to that yet. You like his tape, right, Michael? On what you've heard about him?
Yeah, he's great. I watched him a lot. He started at Niceville, or started at Gadsden County, then transferred to Niceville, but he's actually back home. For people who don't know, he's with Gadsden County. I think they had a coaching change at Niceville, so he went back home. He's a homegrown kid that loves FSU. He's made that very clear. He's camped at FSU several times, visited there numerous times, took an official visit in June, and certainly one that loves FSU. And Herb Hand offered him when he was at UCF. They later offered him, this summer or this spring, whatever, and then they really just kicked up from there. And so he's one that certainly we're tracking that could be one to keep an eye on.
So out of the two guys that Florida State got today, and Devin Carter and Xavier Tiller, which one, Michael, do you like more as a get for Florida State, and why do you like that player as a get for Florida State?
Well, I'd probably say Xavier, just because there wasn't a lot of options, because you don't know. It's not a guarantee that you're able to pull Hezzy Kent as well. That's a guy officially visited over the weekend. We'll talk about him real quickly in a minute. But to me, it's like there's not a lot of choices as far as top tier guys, where it's not belittling. The Devin Carter one was massive. But Xavier, I think when you get a 4-star tight end, there's not a lot of those guys around. There's not a lot of 4-star tight ends around, or top tier guys that can be game changers. So I would probably side a little bit more with Xavier. We did a video earlier today, Tom. You asked me like it was going to be one or the other. I was told definitely they would take Hezzy Kent, no matter what, regardless of what happened with Tiller. I get the feeling he's a different kind of skill set that's very unique that they really covet. So that's one they're still on. I think it's really close with them in Florida. I know there's been some Florida predictions in there, but I've told, like, behind the scenes with FSU, that they feel like there's a strong shot, based on everything that happened this weekend. And I've heard it's kind of 50-50 or close. It could go either way, but if I was leaning away, I guess if you're going slightly Florida, but I think it's close.
Yeah, just the unscientific studying of the interview that you conducted. That body language from Hezzy looked pretty good coming out of Moore Center. It looked like he liked what he heard from Florida State, Michael. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. I think it was very strong. The thing I got from somebody that was close to Hezzy was, this visit really shook him up, that I don't think he thought it was going to be this good. So I think that's kind of made it, tricky. I joked with Matt, because he's from the Jacksonville area, even though he's in Brunswick, Georgia. That's kind of pretty close to Jacksonville. So I just don't trust Jacksonville recruits, man. It's like usually if it's Florida FSU, Florida does pretty well there, but we'll see what happens. But overall, I think they did a tremendous job over the weekend with Hezzy.
A question comes into the chat earlier tonight from Grillmaster. I saw you asked it again. I did not start, Grillmaster. We got you covered. If you have questions for Michael over the next few minutes, by all means, file those in right now. Good times at Florida State, so recruiting questions are welcome in the chat. He asks, do we have any big fish left on the defensive line board? Your thoughts on DL, Michael?
Yeah, they just landed a really good one in Tico Crittenden, so that's certainly one that they certainly added. That's a pure defensive tackle. I mean, when you say defensive line, you better specify because you have edge and you have defensive tackle. I mean, there's a lot of different edge guys. I think Cottrell Webb is one that I feel like they're in a good place for. Chris Addison, who just officially visited, another edge guy that I feel like they feel they're in a good spot for. I guess the biggest fish that you would love that would shock everyone would be James Johnson, who officially visited FSU. He really liked the visit. He's from North Fort Myers, but now he's at it. He lives in Miami. I think that's a tough pull, but that will be the main ones. But I go back to kind of what I've said for a lot of this class. Like I said, they've done a lot better than what I thought they would do in the summer because I think most of their stuff, and you'll see this with the defensive line recruiting, is going to be in-season stuff where kids get to see what their product is and what their process is, and they'll circle back to a lot of these kids. I think you'll see that throughout the year. So I think that's a position, especially defensive tackle, that you'll see them circle back to this once kids start seeing the product.
It makes sense. I asked you on the video we recorded earlier for Xavier Tiller where you think Florida State is going to go next, or where they're cooking right now. What might be the next yes? And your answer was the offensive side of the ball. Do you still feel that 2-3 hours later after we last talked?
I do. I still think it's receiver. When you look at it, it's the time to capitalize. You got a quarterback now. That's the big boom that they got. And then certainly you got Devin Carter. I think you still have Keon Chapman's one that look for, and there's several others. Madden Williams might be a tougher pool because Texas A&M is really solid, but I just still think that's one to watch as well because there's a connection there with Jaden and him. But certainly I think receivers is the kind of place that it would be the smartest move as far as the safest pick of focusing on because that's where you see usually you capitalize when you get a quarterback. You usually see bam, start getting some guys that are going to get on the ball, and yeah, you have that. So I think you're going to see receivers. That would be my guess.
James B., thank you so much for the contribution, good sir. Love the photo too. The booster stop with Mike Norvell. James B. asks with a donation. Thank you so much, Michael. What are the differences you have seen with the new coaches compared to the previous staff, recruiting wise?
I would say more aggressive and more attention to detail was really good. Their attention to detail is like when they want somebody, they put the push on. They're not waiting to see kind of, well, we might have this guy in our hand pocket. It's like if they like them, they don't hesitate. They go. I think we saw that with several recruitments that they've gotten, both commitments and overall. And I think they're just doing one heck of a job, Tom, on these official visits. I mean, they are nailing it. Like they are doing a really good job of. Because a lot of people don't realize, like official visits, there's a lot of study and preparation to what you're going to pitch to each guy. Not every kid is the same way. There's something that resonates with one of them that won't resonate with another. They've done a lot of great study, and that tells me kind of just the work they're putting on behind the scenes before the visits actually happen. I think they're really killing it as far as that area. I think they're more aggressive. Certainly, I see that. You see them more aggressive. And it's just there feels to be more confidence when they're pitching the stuff they're doing with this new staff. Particularly, Gus Malzahn, Evan Cooper have been the ones that you hear a lot about. Maybe Terrence Knighton as late, but really those two guys, they are just have done a great job as far as showcasing what their positions are going to do.
That makes sense to me. Evan Cooper's reputation was that he was a real dog on the trail before he got here, and he's lived up to that. And I have to say, Michael, that day in the luncheon when I interviewed Gus Malzahn, he really didn't care about any questions about the team. I walked up, introduced myself, like, "Hi, I'm Tom. I'm with Warchant." He goes, "What outlet?" I go, "Huh?" He goes, "What outlet?" I'm like, "Well, Warchant." He's like, "Yeah, network." I was like, "Oh, on 3." He goes, "Oh, that's important." I was like, "Oh, okay. So all you think about is recruiting." All right, I got you, pal.
Details.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly. Just a window into Gus. Always thinking about how can this person help me, know more about recruits. One more coach I want to ask you about because there's a question from Dave. We'll get to that in a second. Tim Harris Jr. Receiving, receiver recruiting. It's been a topic that we've done a lot of videos on over the years. Florida State's on a run of receivers right now. As you're saying, they might not be done at receiver. Anything different that you've noticed that Tim Harris is doing or pitching or anything like that?
Oh yeah, it's been very very strong. If you look at it, you don't get a guy like Devin Carter to flip when unless there's a dramatic change as far as the way you're attacking receiver and recruiting. Yeah, Gus helps, but you still have a guy that can connect with that player, and he was the one that got Devin on campus. They kept working it. They kept consistently getting there. And he's a name that I've heard a lot as far as on the trail. Even guys they don't land, they're very high on just his principles and what he does. He's very specific about his teachings. I've seen it myself in person, just the way he does stuff, and it's very direct and genuine. And it comes off as is very easily attracted to. I think that's what Tim does, and so he's doing a phenomenal job. Certainly, it's done a strong job of turning this around of what it previously was. So I don't want to jump on previous coaches, but yeah, there has been certainly some positive, strong developments as far as receiver recruiting.
On a personal note, I'm surprised by it just because, again, Gus, you think like it's going to be very attractive to running backs and tight ends and offensive line, but I mean, they're doing a hell of a job at receiver. Dave asks, any OV scheduled in season? Miami seems like a huge weekend. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, there's going to be several. Like I said, guys, what you're seeing, this is like the preliminary appetizer. Like, this is the appetizer of the season. You're going to have a lot of officials during the season. I think there's going to be several decommitments throughout the country that kids are going to officially visit because kids are going to want to see games and it's going to happen. So you're going to have a lot. So yeah, there will be a big group day for that weekend. That's going to be a massive weekend. It's probably going to be the biggest that they do, no question. It's either Miami or Florida, whatever year you're hosting them. There's always like around 100 recruits, and certainly plenty of official visitors. So you'll definitely see that. And that's why I was pushing so hard that FSU needed to get a quarterback commitment in this class before the season started. And they certainly waited to the last minute, but they got it done. And that's why it's so vital because those are the guys that can attract guys to officially visit and really build around the class. Now you have something that you can build around a class. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of official visits. I fully expect that.
I've asked you this before, Michael. Now that the dead period hits, don't have to worry about in-week visits, weekend visits, all that kind of stuff. Just where does your mind go as somebody who's analyzing Florida State recruiting? Obviously, you got yeses coming in, but what do you look to next? And it's a great way of saying what's coming up on Warchant as well.
Yeah. I think the final big one for me is Chauncey Kenning. That's the really big one. High 4-star. By the way, I do still feel good about my RPM pick, guys. So no concern there. I think that's one that you just close out. I felt that way about Xavier Tiller, even though I was skeptical. That is a massive one. But Kenning, I think, really would put a crystallization on the summer if you got them. Now, there's going to be more besides him, but I think he would really crystallize you going into the season. Now, as far as looking at this, I mean, I'll be honest, Tom, like the first thing I think about is like, man, I really hope this team's good this year because like there's a lot of positives. So it's like that's the first thing that pops in my mind. Like, man, I hope they look good, and it sounds like they will. Throughout most of the year, but I really hope that everything we're hearing that as far as the practices, the organization, all that stuff, that it really connects as far as showcases on the field, and more importantly, can't say this enough. Winning that opener, it would be a massive deal for all parties involved with FSU.
Last thing I'll ask you, Michael, before we sign off for the night is now that all those official visit weekends are done and you have that summer surge, letter grade for Florida State coming out of the summer surge about all the work they've done and what they have to show for it. What would you give them?
I'd give them a B+ so far. I know that's probably people look at that like, man, that's a low grade. No, B+, like you consider everything. Now that grade probably shoots up a little bit higher if you give me a defensive tackle and then you give me Kennan to add on to the summer. Then my grade might change, probably around the A-. But I think B+ is a fair grade as far as there's still stuff you have to fix. There's still stuff you have to do. But let's be real. They went way beyond, kind of what the expectations for a lot of people were for this summer. When you're dealing with a team that was going off a season of 2-10, a lot of people are like, man, I don't know if they're going to get any top guys that come here before the season. They got that. They nailed some. They even got some surprises. Like I don't care what person covers FSU. There's no way before those visits started that you could say Xavier Tiller was going to come to FSU. Like so, there's some that were surprises, and there's some that they just did a really good job finishing the recruitments.
We appreciate the insight as always, Michael, and to Irish O'Fell for his contributions tonight. As always, the managing editor of Warchant.com. We want to thank a few people who contributed to the program. You never have to do this, but Z-Chan, Jeffrey, James B., thank you so much for supporting the channel. We really, really do appreciate it. And always behind the scenes, the director, Ben Spicer, our sponsor, State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. It's been an excellent smash, Michael. This has been a good day for Florida State football. It's been a busy day for Florida State football. Good times, man. I like these vibes. Let's have vibes like this again next time we sign on. All right.
Yeah, I'm with that, guys. We're down with it. Ira's right. We did text. We do text a lot. All three of us. But I just want to thank everyone, including Tom himself, Aslan, and all the different people. That a lot of work that goes on between all this stuff, and there's a lot of work, man, recruiting related. So just going to thank our team, and I want to thank you guys for keeping track as far as what's going on in Warchant, and stay tuned because I think we'll have a lot more. Hopefully, we'll have more days like this.
Yes, hopefully so. Warchant.com is the place to be. Sign up right now. It's $1 for your first week. It's a busy time at Warchant. If you're a student, it's absolutely free. And I gave you those instructions earlier. Good night, everybody. We'll talk to you next time right here on Warchant TV. And stay tuned. You never know. There might be a new commitment in the near future. See you, everybody. Bye.